architecture in their respective domains will share with us their journey and milestones spanning over several decades. Though their practices were based in different geographical locations, India and Nepal, their concerns were similar. This rootedness in local values and traditions as well as global concerns and trends define the range within which their thought processes have gyrated. Brinda Somaya has created a diverse and eclectic portfolio of work that spans the width and depth of India, belonging to the bridge generation. Somaya defines the terms and frames it as a time in which individuals initiated their careers in different arts, including architecture, and designs as they address the changing socio-political landscape of a newly independent India. It was this generation that bridged the architectural spaces between the great masters and the current generation. Vibhuti Mansingh thinks architecture involves and affects every section of society. It is one of the most creative amongst all other professions. There is immense diversity and scope, and its comprehensive sense. It is about itself, about life itself. He has admiration for the works of Frank Lloyd Wright, Louis Kahn, and later the works of Charles Correa, Enzo Tamil, and Santiago Calatra. Mr. Harshvardhan Neotia, chairman of the Amudia Neotia group, has been exceptionally supportive to this annual memorial lecture, which has grown in stature and following over the years. Amudia Neotia has been the sole patron of this initiative. We hope that this will continue in the future, bringing to the city, especially the architects, interior designers, and builders community, the opportunity to meet and listen to leading architects of our generation. I invite him, please share his thoughts for the evening. I will also request Brinda and Vibhuti ji to come on stage. The ceremonial light. Lamp light.
Sorry.
सर एक की मार्का नहीं
বলছি একসাথে তিনজন হাত দিয়ে একবার দাঁড়াবেন প্লিজ তিনজন হাত দিন মোমবাতিতে হাত দিন
सर मैम
দেখো আচ্ছা একটু উপর দিকে মানে সামনের দিকে তাকাবেন প্লিজ
तो वीडियो चालाচ্ছিস এগুলো দাঁড়াচ্ছিস ঠিক আছে সব আওয়াজ লোড হচ্ছে बस बस এই এবার হাত ছাড়া হ্যাঁ थैंक यू सर सर এবার রিকোয়েস্ট অলওয়েজ টু বি देयर यस सर
We request the honorable speakers to be there along with Mr. Neotia, please. And we request Mrs. Manu Neotia to please join them.
भैया यहाँ जो पानी रखा है वो गर्म है
We request Mrs. Neotia to please welcome Mrs. Rita Smith. As is traditional in our society and in our culture.
হ্যাঁ পুরো জায়গায় দাঁড়াও এবার রেকর্ডে দেবে ওই যে এইগুলো দেবে আর ডাউন কর মার রেকর্ড এফ পড়াবে, যতক্ষণ পড়াবে ততক্ষণ রেকর্ডে নিয়ে তারপর লিখে দেবে।
আচ্ছা
হালকা হাতে হাতটা ডান, কোমরটা
Just one memento from us, Kitu ma'am. Please handle a small memento. Yeah.
জুম ইন কর।
I now request Mr. Yogi to felicitate Mr. Vibhuti Manse.
দাঁড়া ফুল আসবে।
Please come.
ওর আই লেভেল ঠিক আছে, হয়ে গেছে। একটা গিফট দেবে। চল,
One
কাট।
memento from us.
চলে। এই তো বাকি।
এই কায়ের সময় শেখাচ্ছিস ওকে? পাগল। ঘ্যাঁ 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 ঘ্যাঁ।
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Truly warm welcome to all of you to the annual Charles Correa Memorial Lecture. Brinda ji, Vibhuti ji, warm welcome to both of you to come at our invitation for this annual event. You all know that Mr. Correa had a close association with our group and built the city center that we are now in. And after he passed away, my friend, an architect Ashish, came to me one day and said, we must remember Mr. Correa at this venue every year. And how to do that was by inviting eminent architects from India and overseas to come and present their works. Works that have made a difference, works that have been celebrated, works that have touched lives, works that have something very innovative to offer, whether it is rootedness, whether it's sustainability, whether it's integrating craftsmanship, or being environmentally conscious. So every year we invite one or two architects, and we are truly privileged that this year we have Brinda ji and Vibhuti Manse ji to be here with us. I just want to say that the journey of working with Mr. Correa was truly exemplary. Besides the fact that he contributed in creating this wonderful public space, I would call it, in the city of Kolkata, I think he helped us understand design and architecture in a way that is very unique. And those 5 or 6 years that we spent between designing and completing this project, the innumerable number of interactions have left an indelible mark, not just on my mind, but on those of my colleagues who have worked with him during that period. I'm truly grateful that all of you are here, and I don't want to stand between you and the wonderful talk that we are going to listen to. So thank you very much. Thank you for your support. And this program is not just limited to being viewed by the audience here, but there is digital streaming of it, and it will get uploaded onto our website, which has a fair amount of visits by young architects and other people interested in design. So with these few words, thank you very much and really appreciate your presence.
Thank you, Mr. Neotia. Our first speaker for the evening will be Brinda Somaya. A few words before she takes the dais. Brinda Somaya, Principal Architect of Somaya and Kalapa Consultants, Mumbai, is an architect in urban conservation. She studied architecture at Mumbai University and was awarded a Masters of Arts and honorary doctorate from the Smith College of Northampton, United States. She started her firm in 1978 in Mumbai. Over 4 decades, she has merged architecture, conservation, and social equity in projects ranging from institutional campuses and rehabilitation of an earthquake-torn village to the restoration of an 18th century cathedral, showing that progress in history need not be at odds. The numerous awards that Brinda has been bestowed with include the Babura Matre Gold Medal by Indian Institute of Architects in 2014. She was appointed as chairperson of the Board of Governors, School of Planning and Architecture in Jewada in 2016. She joined the board of Lafarge Policy Foundation for Sustainable Construction, Zurich, Switzerland in 2007. Presently, she is the ADY Professor at Large at Cornell University, USA. Brinda has lectured and has been exhibited extensively around the world. So with that, may I invite Brinda Somaya to come and share her presentation and speech.
Good evening, everyone. It's truly a pleasure to be here this evening, and I would like to particularly thank Mr. Harshvardhan Neotia and the Ambuja Neotia Foundation for this invitation, and also Ashish Acharya, who never gave up. I think for many years we've been talking and trying to get us here, then the pandemic came and I couldn't make it. But thank you, Ashish, for your dogged determination. So it's very difficult to decide how to present a lecture like this, which is Charles Correa Memorial Lecture, because we certainly can't be trying to compare our works or anything with the great man that went before us. So what I tried to do today is I would like to begin with something I wrote about him after he passed away for a magazine called A+D. On the 16th June, so let me turn to this. On the 16th June 2015, the architectural profession lost its great master. Mumbai, its greatest champion, and India, a famous son. Charles Mark Correa will always be greatly missed. To me personally, he made architecture a magic word and instilled in all of us architects a sense of pride in our profession. His true genius was how he never grew old. He was so relevant to society and community in every decade of his life. He moved effortlessly with time, and that showed in his buildings. Every new project of his was for us a learning experience about space, volume, context, function, and relevance to that site and that history. From the Gandhi Smarak Sangralaya in Ahmedabad, which he designed when he was 28 years old, to his final projects in Lisbon and Toronto, which he completed in his 80s, he did it all with excitement and genius. I remember going to his office a few years ago to discuss some publications. A few minutes into our conversation, he began talking about his project in Portugal. And before we knew it, we were caught up in his excitement as he ran us through his thoughts, his images of the building complex, and why it was so meaningful to all concerned, being a research and diagnostic center. It was an afternoon I will never forget, because that's the gift, amongst many others, that Correa had. He included his listeners in his dreams, his thoughts, his beliefs, and inspired us to go forward like foot soldiers and see what each one of us could do as our profession marched ahead. He made us strive and believe in ourselves and in others. I loved reading his books, his essays, and hearing him talk. Like his work, his writings were also inclusive and so easy to read and understand, but with deep meaning. No complex words and sentences, no complicated structure, no looking down on the rest of the world, but just wonderful stories and essays with tales like learning from Eklavya, routes and bridges, and what one learned from Corbusier. How privileged all of us today to have lived when he did, seen his work, and heard him at seminars and conferences. He never spoke to listeners. He included them in his conversation, which seamlessly covered architecture, literature, poetry, music, and in between anecdotes with his unique humor, lightening the deep and important messages he was conveying to all of us. At his funeral mass, which I attended, the priest said that while we will miss him, we must also celebrate his life and work hard towards fulfilling his vision. I think what we citizens owe him is to ensure that Mumbai, the city he loved so dearly and he always returned to, will finally take his dreams and hopes further. Society failed him with the mill land decision and other urbanization policies to justify him. His concern for the poor and their needs, particularly housing, still remains unaddressed in our urban areas. Perhaps Mumbai and other cities will now make amends by ensuring that the eastern seaboard that we are now going to develop in the city with the port trust lands does not go the way of the mainlands. That will be my city's final tribute, our tribute, to the man who brought our profession and country respect and admiration from all over the world. So we don't have to, we all know about Charles and his temperament, his different ways of dealing with things. But I always love this quote, that we can also change our world in a gentle way. So I want to give a little background. Post-independence, we had, of course, the Nehruvian era, when he brought in, of course, people like Corbusier and Louis Kahn to change the idea of what we believed in as colonial architecture and the reduction of vernacular architecture into our cities. So here you have, of course, Jane Drew, and I'm sure many of you know that it was not Corbusier who was invited to do Chandigarh, but it was actually Jane Drew and her husband Maxwell Fry who were invited. But she was very busy working in Africa, so she suggested to Nehru that perhaps Corbusier could come and work rather than her. And then we had women like Yuri Chowdhury, who many of you may not have even heard of, but who worked very closely with Pierre Jeanneret, who was Corbusier's cousin, to work in Chandigarh as well. And of course, Louis Kahn with IIM, which I will come to later. But we also had at that time, and I'm talking about 1950 to 1970, we had photographers, artists, designers, and scientists. And why were they so important? Because they brought in a new culture. We had Homai Vairawala, who was one of the most famous women photographers of that time. We had artists who broke away from the colonial mold and brought in contemporary artwork into India, whether it was Raza or Hussein or Ara. To the bottom left, of course, we had Mr. Homi Bhabha. Here he is at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. And finally, to the right, we had Charles and Ray Eames, who were brought in through the Ford Foundation to set up the National Institute of Design. So there was a lot of work going on at that time. And during that time, we had the Indian masters of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And they were the early pioneers of contemporary architecture. Of course, Charles heads the list. We had Kamine, Raje, Doshi, Rahman, and today we only have Raj Vimal still alive. And of course, they broke away from the mainstream. They created new cities and buildings that laid the foundation for post-independence India, which is very important. So as students and young professionals, they were our heroes. I mean, we couldn't even think of talking to them or knowing them in any way. We only read about them and saw their buildings, mainly government projects. But there were also women at that time, who many people may not know about. There was Perrin Mistry, who was the first woman architect of India, and many of her buildings still stand in Mumbai. Then we had Praveena Mehta, who worked with Charles on Kanchenjunga, as well as Navi Mumbai with Shirish Patel, Hema Sankalia, who also worked with Praveena, and finally Lavina Modi, who was Pilu Modi's wife, who was our first and I think perhaps only architect who was also a member of parliament. So we had these women also working very actively during that time. I believe, as Ashish said, and I was part of the great generation between the great masters and the current generation. But somebody told me the other day, why do you call yourself a bridge? Because we are not necessarily just a bridge. We might be, on the other side of the bridge with a firm foundation. And perhaps that's also true in a way, because people like us have contributed our generation a lot. So I did spend the first few years of my life in Kolkata. I went to Loreto House. My father was with the Damodar Valley Corporation. And then we moved to Mumbai when I was 8 years old, when he changed his job. So I have one sister. My father was a power engineer and my mother a zoologist. And I first went to an American high school when I was just 16. Subsequently came back, studied at the JJ School of Architecture, where we of course traveled to the Taj and Chandigarh, two places everybody went to. But we had dreams, and we were ready to create our own scripts. That's about all of us from in the 70s, in the early 70s. But we worked in an India with poor communication and little or no patronage from the government. So we had the masters architects, but everybody else was, apart from the Delhi-connected people, were really struggling with difficult times for us. And then we had the emergency also coming up. So we had shortages of every kind. I don't think many can remember we had to stand in queues even for rice and oil. We had ration shops. And that was in the 70s when we were really building up our practices, the late 70s. So we struggled. The building to the left was my first office. It was a Mali's shed, and it had a Mori in the middle of it. So that was my first office, and there was almost a big gap in the middle. I just had one person who worked with me, and then slowly over the years we moved on from that. But we built. And I think the picture to the left is in Soviet Union. I built a hotel in Tashkent. That was all in the 1990s. So many of us of the bridge generation are still practicing teaching in the architectural space of today. So my studio's vocabulary is the Indian architectural vocabulary of water, lines, walls, geometry, and materials. So, architecture, like civilization, is dynamic and ever evolving. So, by exciting architecture is being built all over the world and expanding the vocabulary of the contemporary architecture that we architects in India have, we have to find our balance in design to be able to be part of new and creative experiments, but as well to be part of something that has gone before. Creativity flourishes when there are new ways of thinking about the same problem. But we bring together people with different backgrounds, different training and experiences, and different perspectives. Therefore, the motivation for inclusion and diversity should not come only from the desire to create a just society, but also because it leads to better and more powerful creative processes. I think one of the most important things that architecture can do is to create a difference before the whole planet becomes a mixed mash of grey soup. The only way that we can do that is to be sensitive and responsive to whatever is genuinely different, whether it's the site, the culture, the climate, or the situation. So the reason I'm showing this is we brought out a book on my work, and for the first time we actually counted the number of projects, and we found we had actually built almost 200 projects over the last 45 years. And they vary from a tiny little garden park to a massive 100-acre, 1 million square foot campus in Indore, which we have just finished. But that is what has been the greatest, most wonderful part of my journey, is the diverse portfolio that we have. So Correa says, like a trail that a snail leaves in its wake as it inches forward over the years, an architect leaves behind a body of work, generated by the attitudes he gradually accumulates towards the agendas he deals with. So today, like a snail, I will show you a little trail of my work. So, of course, this is a map of India, our great country, and our studio has built right from the Himalayas down to the deep south, from east through central India, through Jharkhand, through the tribal areas of Madhya Pradesh, right up to the sand dunes of Bhuj. And we fought for open spaces, we protected and conserved, we built for the rural and urban areas, and we want to collaborate and share our culture. So I had to think very carefully what are the 4 projects that I would show you today. And we can't talk about competing or even likening ourselves to Korea in any way. But how could we think of an intangible way of connecting? So the 4 projects I've chosen the street, a street in Mumbai, which is in the mill area of Mumbai. And as most of you know, Korea fought very, very hard for the preservation of the mills. He brought out a huge document on suggestions of how the mills, private and public mills, could be joined together. 1/3 could go to the government for construction of housing, 1/3 could be given back to the developer, and 1/3 could become public space. And the continuity of the public space would create huge gardens larger than even Central Park in New York for the people of the city. Unfortunately, finally, it went up to the Supreme Court and he lost them. So I'm going to show you what work my studio has done on that same street. The second project I'm showing you is in Ahmedabad. It is the restoration of the library building of the Indian Institute of Management. As you know, Korea built many buildings, houses, as well as, of course, the Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad. The third project I'm showing is, of course, in Goa. I mean, he was from Goa. That was his love of, I think, of all the places in India. So we have done a new greenfield project there called the Goa Institute of Management. And finally, knowing his love for the downtrodden in a way, I'm showing you the rehabilitation of a village that was devastated by the 2000 earthquake. In between, I will be touching about the role of women in construction and architecture. So I'm glad we've got a lot of men here today who are forced to listen to what I have to say. So a city has to be remembered. We know this. Equality, adequate infrastructure, sense of belonging, sense of place. And of course, Mumbai. Mumbai is my city. Like I know all of you love Kolkata. So, you know, you have to have that passion for the city that you live in. So you put up with the floods, the storms, the garbage, but you know you don't want to live anywhere else. So this is a map of the city of Mumbai, and the yellow dots show all the places where we have built. The southern part of the city where the dots are very close are our main conservation projects. from cathedrals to schools to all types of buildings. And the ring is the mill district, which I talked to you about. So this is how the mills were. Absolutely beautiful. I was on the Heritage Committee where we also worked very hard to save them, but it was a battle that we lost. We lost very badly. And you can see to the left, they had great volumes, great spaces, big windows. To the right, there is the Phoenix Mall, which has taken an old mill and converted into a mall. So the street that I'm going to talk about is from 1990 to 2007, and how in a contiguous piece of land, my studio did 4 very different projects. We did a restoration project, we did a retrofitting project, adaptive reuse, we did a new project, and we built a skyscraper. So NRK House was a go down. It was part of the Kamla Mills, and it was absolutely dilapidated. But when we took it up, we were sensitive to the street. We didn't break it down. We didn't have to break it down. So we created a series of pavilions and connected them to each other, and it became an office for the person who was the client. So there are many ways that one can restore very, very simply 7,000 square feet, but we saved the building and it is standing even till today. So this was a pure restoration project in 1990, where the philosophy was not to break down and rebuild, but rather to conserve. Soon after that, we went on to an old mill. It was part of the Empire Institute. They used to make fabric. The client came to us and said he had this enormous cement go-down mill and he wanted to convert it into an institute. So this is adaptive reuse. So we go from restoration to adaptive reuse. And we converted it using the wonderful red trusses, the wonderful north light that we had to create libraries, to create a design studio. And mind you, this was all in the 90s. We're talking about 25 years ago or more. But we conserved it. And this is also still standing today. We created the idea of a street within these beautiful volumetric spaces that today we can never even think of building. And then the next building came where the client said that this building of his was falling to ruins. It was actually a workshop, electrical workshop. We wanted to build a new building, 6 of them together. But here also, while we built new, we gave a lot of consideration for the height, for the volumes, of how it relates to the street. Today you have buildings coming up where the first 6 floors are parking and a complete disconnection to the street and people who can walk around on the street, and that's very, very sad. And the new rules in New York City today is that any new building that comes up does not provide any parking at all. That means if you come and live in New York and you want to live in a new apartment, forget having parking space. That's gone. So really, Gladys, we didn't want to create a glass box. So we created a stepped building, taking into account that each and every one of the 6 occupants would have a terrace and a sculptural roof, which we believed went well with some of the other mill buildings that were still over there. So this is it. Of course, this is also still standing today. So we had a very straightforward plane, and then we had a sculptural, very, very sculptural aspects for the terraces that went. But during this time, what was happening to the city of Mumbai? This is what Mumbai became. So we're talking about in 2000, Mumbai had become a city of skyscrapers. I think now it's one of the 3rd or 4th city. Certainly in India, it's number 1 with the number of skyscrapers. So we got a phone call from a friend of mine in New York saying that they were going to build 3 towers, the World Towers, and whether we would be interested in partnering with them. It was I.M. Payne's office, paid carbon free, and it was a difficult decision because I was so used to these buildings which I had done. You can see the Brady Gladys Plaza, you can see how contiguous the space was. It was actually contiguous. Each one of the buildings I showed you was next to each other. So I discussed a lot with my studio, and they were very keen to do this building. And I think it's important to understand what was happening in the city at that time. So I'm going to read a short paragraph to you. I talk about the stretch of the Tulsi Pipe Road, locally referred to as Lower Parel, as a case study, and how the city of Mumbai has changed over time. My studio has been engaged with the development of the street since the 1980s, when we started work on the NRK house, which I showed you first, a small revitalization project right up to the World Tower skyscrapers. The Brady Gladys building and the Empire Institute, which was the shed, were two critical interventions that served the low density and the low rise and high density character of the precinct. These four projects highlight the various approaches of urban design used to sensitively respond to the built form and density. We have to understand that the urban recycling of land has changed. We have begun to appreciate the coexistence of many typologies in a very small precinct, and we have to accept that today. So the history of the city in many ways lies in its urban fabric, in continuity and change. Thus, we must also add a critical mass for the demands of the future. Our contribution in these layers speak for our time and add to the collective history of this space. So the architecture of these four buildings on a brownfield industrial sites of the erstwhile mill land in Mumbai reveals patterns of growth and urban aspirations of the city in different slices of time. So these are the challenges that every city in our country has today. So finally coming to the World Towers, those were very, very challenging. There were 3 towers, but we managed to convince the client, if you see the entry road, that the land to the left, he would leave as a public space. So we were able to conserve the land to the left, that public would come in. And he also agreed not to cut off the road, because the road goes from east to west. To retain the road so that people could still come through. So there's so many ways you can think of still building and understanding the value of land, but not cutting off people from access to different parts of it. So that's what it was. The picture to the upper right is me and my daughter. My daughter is a lawyer turned architect who now works with me for the last 15 years. And the picture to the bottom really shows that right from the beginning of the project, we worked very closely. It was a LODA project. Abhishek Lodha made very clear that we had to work closely with the New York architects. So there was no compromise that they were just going to give a thought or an idea and then we were going to take it forward. The development was right from the beginning, whether our teams went to New York or their teams came over here. And I think it was such a learning experience for everybody concerned. So we should not be scared if clients suggest bringing in international architects. What you have to be careful about is who they choose, how they bring it in, and what is their role. If they think they can just come and give you a master plan and disappear, then I think that's questionable. If they're going to bring value to us as well, and we bring value to them, we should not be fearful. So of course, these are just some images. You can see the scale. It was absolutely massive, 3 buildings, and this is after the completion. This is the area to the left, which now has restaurants and shops. So this is a very important site plan. The dots show the Brady Gladys building. The middle one is the Institute, and the upper left is the NRK house, and I've taken the photograph from the tower. So this is unusual for Mumbai that we've been able to retain all this. The second project is the Vikram Sarabhai Library. I think a lot of you know about the situation. We were appointed in 2014. We actually won a competition. There were no drawings at all. We had to get everything done from scratch. And the competition was, we won what is in the square. That is the 18 dormitories and the Louis Kahn Plaza, which consisted of the library building, the faculty building, and of course the classroom block, and protection of the plaza itself. So we were very pleased, at least we won this much. We didn't know what was going to happen to the housing, etc. But we thought at least that this we were going to be able to save. The buildings were not in a good condition. We all know the brick and many issues were there. Air conditioning over time, maintenance. I mean, we don't want to go into it. So we started from scratch. I actually went to the University of Philadelphia where we have the Louis Kahn archives and studied a lot, found old images where you can see for our women over here how women were working even at that time on the construction. There were hardly any drawings, there were just a couple of structural drawings. But I found this wall planner. And what was interesting, you can see in March that they have just said Louis Kahn died. As many of you may know that he died after his trip to India. He flew back to New York and he actually died in New York City in Grand Central Station. So this is how the people who were working on the project had actually noted his death. So we did a lot of research. You can see I have an hour, so I can't go into details. But you can see that there had been an earthquake, so there were many issues over time. The bricks that had been used were of a poor quality. We had to go back. We did a lot of NDT testing. We had to see how to do the pointing, how to do the cleaning, how the concrete, the covers had gone, the thickness of concrete had gone. We created conservation plans of all the four main areas, which I described to you earlier. And then we began, of course, on the library building itself first. So we restored the fabric, we upgraded even the interiors, studied about his work, created drawings for it, we worked with the Indian Institute of Technology in Madras. They have a heritage cell for seismic considerations, and we actually restored the entire library building. So chamfering of bricks, because as you can see, they had flat arches. For those who know about flat arches, you can see the corners of the building had gone. We had to actually rebuild some corners, but it was all possible. We were able to do everything, including right to the terrace, where even the formwork of the original terrace, we were able to mark and cast the new waterproofing and the new terrace slab along those lines. And of course, here is the chip mosaic. So these are images after restoration. It's a beautiful, magnificent building. It's working well. And the staircases, these of course, I'm sure many of you have been there, the triple height of the library. We made the library relevant for today. So it's not just about books, it's a digital library. Young people actually work in very different ways. They need to share the way they study. So before and after, the way we did the interiors differs a lot. Lighting, of course, had to be upgraded. And we also found wonderful old embroidery work of Saroj Ben, applique work, which was now about 50 years old almost. And that has been now sent to Delhi for restoration. So these are again how young people sit and work today, the graphics, the signage. This was at the opening, and this was the team that worked on it from all sides. And we won almost the highest award. The UNESCO gives one award for everything, and then they have distinction, merit, and they work their way down. And we won the award of distinction for the restoration of this library. So, what is happening? I think there are no answers. I think all of you know the situation. So we have to hope and pray. I'm very good friends with Louis Kahn's son, Nathaniel, his mother, and also his sisters. And I was in New York in March, and you may have seen Nathaniel's film, My Architect. And it's been repurposed, and he had a showing in New York, and after that he had a panel with me and him talking about Kahn, and of course not just his work in India, but also particularly his work in Bangladesh and in Dhaka as well. So I come to Goa because of Charles again, and this was a greenfield project. We've been working on it, we're now in our fourth phase. There was nothing on top of this hill except red laterite, and no features, no trees, no anything. And it was 50 acres of land. So I just put some images, Google images, how about 70% of our work is with repetitive clients because that's our philosophy. So you can see over the years how the going, this is recent, October 22, but I think we've reached now the full utilization of the land and the client is now not going to build anything more. So of course these are the site plan, these are some images of the building. We do a lot of research before we begin any project. So what does GOA signify? The use of laterite, use of color, what's important, the porosity of the campus, the gradients, the contours, so many different things. Strong entrance, color. So this is the entrance and you can look down on magnificent views since it was on top of a hill on all sides. And we've used a lot of plantation. We replanted because there was nothing over there. Color brought in for the students, different classrooms, different spinning out spaces, breakout spaces. How do we capture the views and the hills? Amphitheaters, the students have a great time walking through. Hidden gardens, hidden staircases, maybe they go out for a smoke or whatever. Creation of plazas between the buildings as well. Quiet spaces where they can come to, and of course the hostels where all of them live. We've created plazas because the land was very steep, it was a mountain. So how do we create interest even in the dormitory situations as well? The entire complex is not just, it generates enough electricity not just for itself, but it also sells into the grid. So it is totally self-sufficient, it's a very sustainable campus in every respect possible. And these are some images. So to come to women straight from there, this is an image of Goa. So I was talking to the women on the campus, and what's worrying is that women in India from 30% of workforce, they have come down to 26% of the workforce. And that is extremely worrying. And as far as construction is concerned, women have practically disappeared. And one of the reasons is this, because when I spoke to these women who were building the Goa Institute of Management, I asked them how they managed. So they said that 6 of them would get together, 1 of them would stay behind with the children, which they all had, were off-site, and the other 6 would work, and then they would share their days earning with the 7th woman. So the contractors are making enough money. They have to provide adequate, decent housing, creches, schools for children on remote construction sites. And I have put it into all my bills of quantities and specifications for the last 30 years. So you can see the school. They told me they cannot build a separate school. I said, it doesn't matter, as long as it's a school with even different age groups, but the women are able to leave their children during the day while they work. This was in Russia, and I think when I had a very lonely many first years because there were not many women who were running their own studio. And when we won a competition to build a hotel in Tashkent, and I remember all the meetings used to be in Moscow because those days it was the Soviet Union. And for the first time I came across women structural engineers, women MEP engineers, women contractors, which we had never seen in India before. So this was 1989. And you can see the picture on the upper left, Women's Day, and down. So it taught us a lot. It taught us that women really don't have to have such lonely existences, but they can come out and they can do every type of work connected with the construction industry. And when we did factories, like this is the Pali factory in Bangalore, at least what we did, this was long ago in 2000, they had nothing. They would work all day and come full of cement and didn't even have a place to wash or whatever. So these are basic things. Give them a light, give them water, give them a toilet. So we can, all the women today, make sure you put it, and the men, make sure you put it right into your tender documents and bills of quantities. When we built a hotel in Kolkata, you can see The women are doing all the hard work, and men are standing. They are the ones climbing up and down with the cement on their heads. So it's a very, very difficult life. But now I'm happy to say this is a campus which we've just finished for Tata Consultancy Services in Indore. It's a 100-acre property. We built 1 million square feet. And you can see the women on my site now. I inspected their accommodation, much to the chagrin of the contractor. But there they are with their shoes, with their helmets, and with their dabbas. And they are walking with their heads up, and they're walking to work. And that's me on the left with my hat. So it is possible, and that's what we want. So we don't want women to be doing just what's on the left. People like Seva and Ahmedabad are teaching women to be masons and painters. In the United States, women are welders. So what I did, that I organized, I have a foundation called the Hekar Foundation, and it's an acronym for Heritage, Education, Conservation, Architecture, and Restoration. And we have had 2 conferences, one in 2000 and one in 2020 for women, where we brought out a celebration of women's work. No moaning and groaning allowed. So this was a friend of mine who wrote a poem for one of the conferences, the first one. And she said, what of all those nameless hands that chiseled and carved, hauled and lifted, placed and set, each block of someone else's dream, and made it real, then walked away into the invisible footnotes of history. So we don't want women to be invisible anymore. So this is the foundation. The picture to the left is 2000, and the picture to the right is 2020. We brought out lots of books, and the bottom right is my book. It's a monograph. It's called Works and Continuities. And the book in the middle is about 100 years old houses. And Charles Correa released that book for me. And wherever he would meet me outside, he would say, Brenda, I really love that book. I'm so glad you called me to release it. And I was surprised because, for somebody like him to be so generous about coming and releasing that book. There's a small video I'm going to show you. So I'm sure many of you recognize a lot of these women today. Many of them are highly successful. And we call the first woman, the video will show you, it is 23 years old now. So all of us were much younger. So short video.
20 years ago, over 200 architects from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Singapore and Australia got together to celebrate.
We all have had common traditions, problems and aspirations. We all come from countries that have a multiplicity of civilizations and enjoy a cultural heritage of genius and beauty. These traditions are a source of inspiration to us architects as we attempt to infuse meaning into our work.
25 women exhibited their work at the National Gallery of Modern Art to express the collective power of women in architecture. We celebrated the work of South Asia's first 3 women architects, Yasmin Lari from Pakistan,
Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you greetings from women of Pakistan.
Mirit De Silva from Sri Lanka.
Mirit would have loved to be here. She is the type of person who would have thoroughly enjoyed this type of meeting.
And Pen Mistry, the first woman to qualify as an architect in India. 20 years later, we welcome back and many more old and new friends who join us this year to a conference that spans 3 days with 35 speakers and over 600 delegates, and an exhibition of the past, present and future of design, seen through the eyes of a diverse set of design professionals, captured forever in a digital archive. Welcome to Women in Design 2020 Plus.
So Yasmin Lari just won the Royal Institute of British Architects this year, and it's amazing how she had never ever been invited or come to India. Minette, of course, is now the most popular person, dead person actually, she's no more alive, but there's huge amount of research being done on her all over Sri Lanka and in the West. And so we had also an exhibition of work because we have also always included craft into our projects in different ways. It doesn't matter whether it is who has done it. So for this exhibition, you can see, we got two women from Andhra Pradesh to come and do the entire exhibition. You can see how contemporary their work was. This was a project we did with Todd Williams and Billy Chin. They are the architects for the Obama Library now coming up and the US Embassy in Mexico. We have been working with them on a project since 2009. So with Billy, we were very interested in having very large hangings, woven hangings. So we actually worked with women weaves to set up large looms to take care of these large hangings that we wanted in different parts of the country. And you can see we just completed also the international headquarters of the Tata Group in Bombay House, where we used women in many, many different ways for the artwork. And we've also done recently during COVID, the headquarters international again of Bharat Petroleum. So here what we did is, since it was COVID time, we got 200 artists from different parts of the country to work only on sustainable material, on waste. So we created the entire artwork for the building on waste. Waste paper, waste electronics, and these are some of the images that you can see that the women are working on. Now beneath and beyond the strata of function and structure, materials and texture, lie the deepest and most compulsive layers of war. And these can manifest themselves not only in epic monumental architecture, but in projects of a much smaller, more humble scale as well, said Correa. So this is the last project I'm showing you. It's a village that was completely devastated by the 2000 earthquake. I have a client who's been my client since I started work in 1978. They're still my clients today, except it's the next generation working with my children, my daughter rather, not my son. And we have an arrangement that they give us corporate work and we do pro bono work for them because they have a foundation. Whether it's in Mumbai, whether it is an emergency center. So soon after this earthquake happened, I got a call from them saying, we have to go and restore a village immediately, we have to do something. So in Bhuj, we had most of the villages which had a Muslim majority were taken over by Muslim trusts. Those which had a Hindu majority had been taken over by Hindu trusts. And then you had the government who was just finding open land and building on a grid. So we had to find a village that nobody had taken. So we worked with an NGO, a wonderful NGO, to locate this village called Badli, which is northwest of Bhuj, near almost on the Pakistan border. And I went with my clients, and this was the state of the school. The village had been completely destroyed. 95% of the houses had been destroyed. And there was nothing left except debris lying everywhere. So we went round. You can see there I am to the left. And the village had a woman panchayat. She was one hot number, so to say. She was very involved. And she would make me come and sit and say, what are you going to do for the village? So I had to sit on a charpoy, and she would bring out some horrible purple liquid, which I had to drink, and I was always petrified because I was worried about water. And then she would bring some peanuts from the fields, a lot of peanuts are growing there, some raw mango pieces, and dictate to us about many, many things. But we knew what we wanted to do, and what we did not want to do was to move these people to another part of the land. So we asked them, they said, we don't mind, it was 26 January, they said, we don't mind anything, we will stay out in the cold, but we do not want to move out of our own little plot with our own neighbors. So the first thing we had to do was to take a big survey of the land, because they were willing to do that, mark each and every house, who lived there, and what happened. Then we decided how are we going to encourage them. They were in depression. So we told them that we will buy the materials, and when I say we, I meant the clients. buy the materials and give it free to them, but we will not build for them. We will not bring a contractor to build. They're perfectly capable of building themselves, but we would pay them for their labor. So that way they would earn, they would get back their self-respect, and we would give them the materials. It took a while. We also at that time gave 3 options, and there's a lot of stories about the options, but I won't go into it. But we also made the buildings cyclone proof. As you know, recently there was a cyclone also in Gujarat. So it was not just earthquakes, it was also cyclones. And finally they began to rebuild their houses. So you can see over here, the very artistic people. We saved all the doors, saved all the windows, we saved all the debris, we used the debris for foundations, and put back each door and window back to their original house for a sense of continuity that they had. And then provided them materials which they began to decorate, sometimes over the top, but that's how it was, and they decorated. We also repaired the mosque, the Dargah rather, as well as the temple. These are the 2 young structural engineers who worked with me on the project. And then we came to the school, and they were desperate because the school was completely gone. And they said, if you don't hurry up and do something, the children will be taken away to the fields to work and we'll never get them back to the school. So upper left, we created a temporary shed and what you can see over there, the water tanks, and we told them to start the school back in open air. And then we decided, to the bottom you can see, looks like an all-woman force, doesn't it? But we had, of course, our client as well. His wife is third to the right. All of them were very involved. So what happened with the school? The farmer, the school was in a small piece of land. The farmer in the adjoining piece said, I will give you my part of my farm so you can build a bigger school. And one of the conditions I gave the client was that we should have a balwadi and we should have a women's center because they made beautiful bandini work. And you can see how we rebuilt. Very simple school. It's done very well. It was recently, I think in 2020, it was in the Friday Atlas of 20th century architecture. Very, very inexpensive. And these are the boys and girls now who go to the school. They get midday lunch. Now this is Mezzabine. When I went in 2002, she was a little girl sitting out in the cold. And her mother told me that we don't want to move from this piece of land. I said, she's so young, she'll be good. She said, you don't worry. Then 2006, when we went back, we're still in touch with the village, of course. There she is. And 2016, she's now finished the 10th standard and she's gone to the next village to go to school because they have only up to class 10. Now they're after me to build one more floor so that they can actually stay in their own village. There's a small little video about the village. When I finished the villagers embroidered a sari for me, which I wore for my daughter's engagement. And that must be one of the most beautiful gifts that I ever got. So it's not finished. There's one more slide. Did I do something wrong? There's one more slide. So this is my studio. We all know that everything about our profession is collaborative. There are no stars, there are no individuals. As much as Correa was a star. But remember, there must be many people who worked with him. I think there are many people here today. So everything about our profession is working together, is collaborative work. And how is it that we can manage to make the difference? So what is our responsibility? So since I have another few minutes, am I right? I'll tell you a little folk story. There was a big fire in a forest. I love to tell this story to young people. And all the animals ran away. The tigers, the lions, or whatever. And there was only a little bird that was going to a stream nearby, picking up water in his beak and trying to put out the fire. So everyone was laughing at this bird and says, "You're never going to be able to put out this fire." So the bird said, "It doesn't matter. At least I'm doing my bit." So I gave this talk actually in Goa when Charles Correa gave his, the last conference that he had when Doshi and he and all came to Goa. And I ended my talk with just this bit of the story. And when I went back the next day to Mumbai, my email was full of messages and saying, "Man, you've forgotten the rest of the story." I said, "I didn't know there was a rest, and what is it?" And they said, "The rest of the story is the bird continued going up and down with this water in its beak. And the gods above felt so sad for the bird that it was trying so hard to put out the fire that they began to cry. And when the gods cry, it comes down as rain. And the rain put out the fire. So each one of us can do our bit, however small or big, it doesn't matter." So I have a little music audio with this last slide. I want to play that. Can you just check? There's a little audio. So I had put Rabindranath Tagore's favorite song, that we have to march on, alone if necessary, but we have to march on. Thank you.
Thank you, Brinda. That was really inspirational. Thank you very much. Our next speaker for the evening is Vibhuti Mansingh from Kathmandu. Chief Architect of Technical Interface, Kathmandu, Nepal. Vibhuti Mansingh graduated from West Pakistan University Engineering and Technology in Lahore in 1972. He obtained his postgraduate training in Japan. After serving the Nepal government for a short stint, he set up his architectural practice in 1979. Besides numerous buildings in Nepal of various typologies, in the last 5 decades, he has also done notable work in heritage promotion through design build of national pavilions as part of Nepal's participation in World Expos in Germany, China, and Italy. He was commended with a plaque from the Society of Consulting Architectural and Engineering Firms. A classicist at heart, he has been against form seeking that is detached from function and purpose. His intellectual journey has led him to find solace and validation in the esoteric pursuits of cosmology, symbolism, archetypes, or other such concerns related to roots of person, society, culture, nation, or species. May I invite architect Mansi to come to the dais and share his journey and exploration area that has spanned for 50 years. Please.
Thank you, Ashish. I have to ask him, I tend to forget these days. Frankly, I cannot even begin to match Linda Somaya's works, nor her breadth of experience. I think she belongs to the second generation of architects after Charles Correa and Toshi. Anyway, I was telling our friends who were comfortable dinner yesterday that we, Nepal, are only about 3% of India in terms of population and corresponding land mass and volume of work possibly. So I have very little match Brinda man, but I'll try and do what I can. So firstly, namaskar and greetings from Nepal, your pesky little neighbor up north. Pesky as in irritating and annoying. You know, we have a joke, a standing joke in Kathmandu, says, India is great. The only problem are the Indians. You see, you guys bumped into us about 200 million years ago. With a little help from plate tectonics, you have been pushing and pushing and pushing us. And we have no place to go, you see, and we have going back and back and back. And so we have this love-hate relationship. But we have grown up being hugely impressed, hugely influenced by certain aspects of Indian culture. We love Mohammad Rafi, we love Lata Mangeshkar, we love Kishore Kumar, and lately Shreya Ghosal and Arijit Singh. You see, young people over there scream in delight whenever Arijit Singh comes out with "Hum tere bin ab reh nahi sakta." And we oldies, we swoon in delight, we swoon in ecstasy whenever Lata Mangeshkar croons, एक राधा और एक मीरा, दोनों ने चाहा श्याम को. We swoon in ecstasy whenever Lata Mangeshkar croons that song, because we can identify very easily with Radha and Meera. Okay, so much for context. Now, you have no idea how much we value this speaking engagement, so much so that my wife has joined me. And my son and my grandson, they flew in from Singapore. It's a very, very valuable engagement for us. And we have to thank the New Year group, especially Mr. Harshvardhan Yotia, with whom we had a very delightful lunch today. And at that lunch, maybe I made a very insensitive remark about him being publicity shy. Maybe it was very insensitive, but it is true that the Neotia group is not, in spite of its huge properties all over, properties that can match the big houses of India. It's very recently that we have come to hear of the Neotia group. So I was telling him that maybe he is advertisement allergic or publicity shy. Please don't mind my sensitive remarks. And I also have to thank Mr. Acharya, of course, whose email I firstly received as an introduction to this speaking engagement, and of course to Mr. Vijay Dwivedi as well, and of course I must not miss my companion for the last 2 or 3 days, Mr. Ayamongshu Chatterjee. Oh, I learned that he's a professor in linguistics. It was a great delight to know that he worked in South America as well. And I have to thank him as well. Now, this first slide, you see, that sums up my presentation for this evening. It's based on a photo that I found in the internet. It's among the many photographs that we find in the internet of Charles Correa, but this I found very, very touching, especially the eyes. And the eyes were so expressive, I found it so expressive that I had to laugh. I had to write the 2 names over the 2 lines over there, above, behind, beneath the knowing eyes, painful knowledge hovers, hides and lurks. Actually, this is a paraphrase from a obituary that I read somewhere. I paraphrased it, I added something to it. So what I found in those eyes will form the essence of my presentation today. It might be a very unconventional presentation on a great man, but this, you might find this very subjective, very untruthful or very self-indulgent sort of presentation, but I think this is a very legitimate and a proper sort of thing to present, because that's a critic as an artist also has many things to contribute besides talking about someone's works and thoughts. And that's what I struggled with for the past 2 or 3 months. You see, I struggled with doubts about the approaches to a memorial lecture. I was concerned about how to approach this engagement. I was worried, what will they think, what will they say? But those eyes, I don't know what you see in those eyes, but I see very different things. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And those eyes, it resonated. And this is, the title is Resonances. And it is readings into Charles Correa. My personal readings, my subjective readings into his eyes that I want to talk about. More than his works, of course, more than his works. His works have been talked about many, many times, and as I said, I can't even begin to match Brinda's historical overviews of architecture in India and her overviews of South Korea's works. So I wish to take a different approach today. But firstly, I should like to dwell at some length on default conditions which pervade and prevail over discourses of this sort. Conditions which I call tyrannies, in fact. Tyrannies because they tend to determine how you are perceived. Tyrannies, these conditions which tend to produce oppressive bias. Tyrannies of discourse, I call it. First of all, the tyrannies of the medium. Tyrannies of the medium means the language which we speak, and especially the English language. We are not natural born speakers of English language. So every time we have to speak publicly in English, we get butterfly in our stomach. So I have to apologize beforehand if I am misinterpreted or if my English is less than smooth. And the second tyranny, of course, is tyranny of the pedigree. Pedigree means I don't have anything above a basic degree in architecture. I don't have a proud prefix like DR, doctor, or a similar suffix like PhD or something like that, beyond my basic degree in architecture and some training which I got in Japan. I don't have anything else. So it brands me into being a middle brow. You can call me a middle brow. But it's a tyranny of the pedigree, I call it. And the third is the most serious, tyranny of the GPS. GPS stands for Global Positioning System. It has to do with a country's position in the international geopolitical order. The food chain, call it, if you wish to call it, or the pecking order. And we know, and I know specifically, how much where Nepal stands in that pecking order. So, whatever I say tends to be, our country's reputation or lack of it tends to determine how we are perceived. So that's a tyranny, and I have railed against these tyrannies in many discourses of this kind. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you are not affected or influenced by these tyrannies and take what I say at its face value or according to its own merit. So my presentation might be, as I said, very unconventional. I don't want to talk about South Korea's works as such because many things have been said, many books have been written, and many people have dwelt on it for a long time, so I can't add anything. I couldn't possibly add anything to it. So, and I have not traveled 1,000 miles to talk about town planning or such technical topics. Tech talk is the last thing I want to do today. So, possibly, three things might happen. during the next half hour or so. Possibly most of you will fall asleep. The rest will wonder what the hell he is talking about. But I hope some of you will be impressed, will be carried away by the last item that I have in my talk. It's a film clip which symbolizes our life in general, whether you are in business or in the profession, whether you are in architecture or other professions. That film clip, I never get tired of looking at it. It's a symbolic, I call it an allegory of our profession, of our lives. So I hope some of you will be carried away by it. Maybe it will make you cry or even weep. Let's see what it does. And as I said, my approach is subjective, very personal. As I said, it's a perfectly valid and legitimate approach. Call it an archaeology of the mind. When I dig into his eyes, is three things. The first is a poem that was recited by an obscure American poet in Lahore, that was around 50 years back. And it has stayed with me. It says the world happens twice. Once the way we see it as, and it happens deep down the way it is. It has stayed with me ever since. The second is, these are layers that I see in his eyes, in Correa's eyes. The second is a term that I found in a Nobel laureate, Orhan Pamuk, a Turkish writer, who talks about what he calls huzun. It's a Turkish word which means a melancholy, a sadness which springs from distance to God. Because in a godless world, it means a distance from your ideals, a distance from what you love most. That happens to be called huzun. That's one of the things I found in Charles Correa's eyes. And the third thing that I found in his eyes, it's memento mori. Those of you who know some Latin know what that means, but we are told that 2000 years ago, you see, at the peak of the Roman Empire, the emperors and generals and senators, in their public appearances, used to have someone at the back who used to whisper into their ears this phrase, memento mori. And that determined these emperors and generals and senators' actions and thoughts. Memento mori actually means remember that you are mortal. It's a very interesting observation that I read somewhere, and this is the third layer that I found in Correa's eyes. The first layer, that very nice poem by an American poet. The second layer I found was that of huzun. The third layer is memento mori, a realization of our mortality. And I always like to gaze into his eyes and remember these three things. By his eyes used to this thing called the world happened twice, and eyes reconciled to a state of huzun, And then, of course, memento mori. Memento mori has been expressed by our very own Yudhishthir also in Mahabharata, who said the idea of our mortality, the idea of our death, the knowledge, the acknowledgement of our death is the greatest knowledge that we can possibly have. And it's very strange, you might find it very strange, but that's what I read into Charles Correa's eyes, especially that photograph. And I hope you find it relevant. I hope you don't find it, say, I'm mad or something. And memento mori is something special that Charles Correa visited Nepal in 2013, barely 2 years before his death. And some friends who took him around Nepal told us about his charming, childlike curiosity about everything and his basic impatience. So that's what reminded me of memento mori, his realization, possibly, of the pervasive mortality of our species. And this thing, all these resonates with me. It rings bells deep, deep inside. That resonates. And see, these are some of his works which resonated with me and which I'm sure has produced some feelings that I found in his eyes. For example, the ritualistic pathway, the rain fallen